I had just inherited $11 million and hurried home to share the news with my husband. But before I could, a terrible accident landed me in the hospital. To my surprise, he never showed up. When I finally called, he told me he didn't have time or money to waste on a loser. A few days later, he walked in with his new wife just to laugh at me. But the moment she saw me, she screamed, "Oh my God, she is. You won't believe what happened to me." One moment, I was flying high, inheriting $1 million from an estranged uncle, dreaming of a new life with my husband, Eric. The next, my world literally shattered in a horrific car crash. But the real devastation wasn't my broken body, it was Eric's chilling words when he finally responded, and the unimaginable scream that tore through the hospital room when he eventually walked in with his new wife. Let me take you back to how my life fell apart, and then, miraculously, came back together in ways I never, ever could have imagined. My relationship with my Uncle James was always complicated. He was my dad's older brother, but they'd had a massive falling out decades ago over the family business. The rift was so deep that we barely acknowledged each other, even at the rare holiday gatherings. Yet, I had these really fond memories of visiting his huge countryside estate as a kid. It felt like magic, with Uncle James showing me his collection of rare books and telling me stories of his adventures abroad. He was a self-made millionaire, a legendary real estate developer. His business mind was incredible, but his personal life? Empty. No wife, no kids, just work. What I didn't know until much later was that he'd been secretly keeping tabs on me all those years. He once told me, when I was about 12, "You remind me of myself at your age, Morgan. Smart, stubborn, not afraid to speak your mind." After college, when I moved away, Uncle James started sending me birthday cards and letters. I'd respond politely, briefly, not really knowing how to bridge that family divide. The letters were mundane, but they built this quiet, unexpected connection. Then, 6 months before everything changed, I heard through a distant cousin that Uncle James had advanced heart disease. I went to visit him at the hospital. He looked so frail, a shadow of the imposing figure I remembered. But his eyes lit up when I walked in. "Morgan," he whispered, "I always knew you'd come back." Those visits turned into weekly catch-ups. We talked about everything. Philosophy, politics, life. It was like we were making up for decades of lost time. We never mentioned the feud with my father. It was a silent agreement to start fresh. "Life's too short for grudges," he told me once. I learned that lesson too late. 3 months later, he passed away peacefully. I mourned him more deeply than I ever expected. Now, Eric. Our love story began 7 years ago at an art exhibition. I was writing a piece for a local magazine, and he was one of the featured artists. His abstract paintings were captivating, but his confidence, his passion when he spoke about his work, that was magnetic. "Art is about seeing the world differently," he told me in our interview. "Finding beauty in chaos." We started dating, married within a year in a small ceremony. We couldn't afford lavish, but it was perfect. Eric was determined to make it as an artist, and I supported his dream wholeheartedly. I took a more stable job in advertising to keep us afloat while he pursued galleries and commissions. For the first few years, it was wonderful, even with our financial struggles. We lived in a modest apartment, saved where we could, and dreamed about our future. He'd paint late into the night, I'd edit ad copy. We were partners. But the last 2 years? Different. His art career was stagnant, and the rejections changed him. He became moody, withdrawn, sometimes disappearing for hours. If I asked, he'd snap about needing space to think or networking. Our bank account dwindled as he invested in expensive materials for projects that never materialized. "You just don't understand the artistic process," became his go-to excuse for everything. Then, the call. I was at work when Benjamin Harrison, Uncle James's attorney, rang. "Morgan Wallace," he said, "I'm handling the estate of James Wallace. Can you come to my office today?" I agreed, expecting a small memento, maybe a letter. When Benjamin slid the will across his desk, I nearly fell out of my chair. Uncle James had left me everything. His entire estate, valued at $11 million, plus the family property. "He revised his will after your reconciliation," Benjamin explained. He was quite impressed with how you'd built your life on your own terms. Attached to the will was a letter, in Uncle James's familiar handwriting. Dear Morgan, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. I've watched you grow from afar, admiring your determination and kind heart. You have the same spark I once had, but with the wisdom I lacked. This money is a tool, not a solution. Use it well, be happy, and remember that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. With love, your Uncle James. I signed the papers in a daze. $11 million. It was an unfathomable amount. Our debts could be paid off. Eric could pursue his art without financial pressure. We could buy a house, travel, start a family. The possibilities felt endless. On my way out, I stopped at a jewelry store and bought an expensive watch for Eric, a symbol of our new beginning. I decided not to tell him over the phone. News like this deserved a proper celebration. I called him anyway, just to say I was coming home early with good news. He sounded distracted, almost annoyed. I'm kind of in the middle of something, Morgan. A new art project. Very experimental. I pressed him. This is important, Eric. I'll be home in 30 minutes. Fine. Just don't expect much reaction. I'm in my creative zone. I hung up, slightly deflated, but still buzzing with excitement. Once he heard the news, his mood would surely change. Little did I know, that call would be one of our last normal conversations. The rain had just started as I pulled onto the highway, a light drizzle making the road gleam. I remember turning on the radio, an upbeat song playing as I mentally rehearsed how I'd tell Eric. Maybe I'd make him close his eyes, place the watch in his hands, then share the incredible news. I imagined his face lighting up, the stress of recent years melting away. I was so consumed with these thoughts that I almost missed it. A semi-truck 2 lanes over suddenly swerved, its tires skidding on the wet pavement. Time seemed to slow as I watched it jackknife, the massive trailer swinging toward me like a terrible pendulum. I jerked the wheel hard, but it was too late. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched against metal as my car spun violently. The airbag exploded into my face with shocking force. Through the chaos, I remember seeing the watch box fly open, the expensive timepiece sliding across the dashboard in slow motion. My last conscious thought was bizarrely about a roadside billboard advertising family insurance with the tagline, "Protect what matters most." Then, darkness. I awoke to the steady beep of heart monitors and that distinct antiseptic hospital smell. My entire body felt like it had been run through a meat grinder. Even breathing sent sharp pains through my chest. I tried to move and instantly regretted it. Easy there, a gentle voice cautioned. You need to stay still. I forced my eyes to focus on the woman. In blue scrubs beside my bed. Sarah Winters, RN. What happened? My voice came out as a rasp. You were in a serious accident on Highway 65, Sarah explained, checking in 4-line. You've been unconscious for almost 2 days. 2 days. The information landed like a brick. My husband, does Eric know I'm here? Sarah's expression shifted subtly. We contacted the emergency number in your phone. Left several messages. But he hasn't come. Even in my drugged state, I felt a stab of confusion. Not yet, but I'm sure he will soon, she added, though her tone lacked conviction. Later that day, Dr. Daniel Foster explained the extent of my injuries. 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, a compound fracture in my right leg requiring surgical pins, and various lacerations. Weeks of hospitalization, months of physical therapy. You were extraordinarily lucky, he said. The driver of the truck that hit you didn't survive. Lucky? I didn't feel lucky as I lay there, unable to reach my husband. I tried calling Eric repeatedly, straight to voicemail. Text messages were delivered but unanswered. Each passing hour without response amplified my anxiety. Sarah became my primary nurse and, increasingly, my confidant. She'd check on me even when not assigned to my room, bringing extra pudding or just sitting with me. Still no word, she asked on the 3rd day, helping me sit up. I shook my head, wincing. I don't understand. Even if his phone died, he'd know something was wrong when I didn't come home. On day 4, I finally got a text from Eric. Heard about accident. Really busy with breakthrough project. We'll visit when things calm down. No questions about my condition. No offer to help. Just nothing. That doesn't sound right. Sarah frowned when I showed her the message. Do you have friends who could check on him? I called my friend Melanie, but she sounded strange, making excuses about why she couldn't visit. When I pressed her about Eric, she quickly changed the subject. By the end of the first week, I was suspicious. Using Sarah's tablet, I checked social media and found something that made my blood run cold. Eric had checked into Artemis Gallery, an exclusive art club known for its wealthy patrons, with a caption about celebrating new beginnings. With shaking hands, I called his number again. This time he answered, his voice annoyed, music playing loudly in the background. Eric, I'm in the hospital. I've been here for a week. Where are you? A pause. Look, Morgan, I'm in the middle of something important. More important than your wife being in critical condition? Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, colder. I don't have time or money for a loser, Morgan. Some of us are moving forward with our lives. The phone went dead. I stared at it in disbelief, tears streaming down my face. What did he mean, loser? I had just inherited $11 million. And more importantly, I was his wife, injured and alone. Sarah found me sobbing an hour later and immediately called for a sedative. As the medication took effect, dulling both physical and emotional pain, one thought kept circling in my foggy mind. Something was very, very wrong. The days following Eric's cruel phone call were the darkest of my life. I refused food, barely slept, and cried until I had no tears left. The physical pain of my injuries paled compared to the emotional devastation. 7 years of marriage, and this was how it ended? A dismissal so cold, it felt like talking to a stranger. Sarah called in Dr. Jessica Parker, the hospital psychologist. A petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, Jessica didn't offer empty platitudes. What you're experiencing is trauma on multiple levels, she explained. Physical injury, emotional betrayal, and the shock of sudden abandonment. It's normal to feel like you're drowning. Did he know? I asked aloud, not really expecting an answer. What money? Jessica asked. I hadn't told anyone at the hospital about my inheritance. It seemed unimportant compared to everything else. But now, I wondered if it was the key to understanding Eric's behavior. I inherited $11 million the day of my accident, I explained. I was on my way to tell Eric when the crash happened. Jessica's eyebrows shot up. That certainly adds another dimension to consider. 2 days later, Melanie finally visited. She entered my room cautiously, clutching a small bouquet of flowers, looking everywhere but at me. You look terrible, she blurted, then immediately grimaced. Sorry, that came out wrong. Why have you been avoiding me? I asked directly. The medications had dulled my capacity for social niceties. Melanie sat heavily in the visitor's chair, flowers forgotten in her lap. I didn't know what to say, Morgan. Everything is so messed up. Tell me what's going on with Eric. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, twisting it nervously. He's with someone else now. A woman named Vanessa. The words hit me like another car crash. What do you mean, with someone else? We're married. He's been telling people you didn't survive the accident, she whispered, tears forming. He even held a small memorial gathering at your apartment last week. I couldn't bring myself to go. The room seemed to tilt sideways. He told people I was dead while I was lying here in the hospital. Melanie nodded miserably. I only found out you were alive when Sarah called me yesterday. Eric blocked all your social media accounts. He changed the locks on your apartment. Show me, I demanded. Show me this woman. Reluctantly, Melanie pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. There he was, my husband, arm around a slender woman with dark hair. They were at an art gallery, champagne glasses in hand, looking for all the world like an established couple. Something about the woman's face triggered an odd sense of familiarity. She was younger than me, maybe mid-20s, stylishly dressed, with features that somehow echoed my own. Her name is Vanessa Lauren, Melanie explained. She's some kind of assistant at the Haywood Gallery. They met about 3 months ago, according to mutual friends. 3 months. While I was visiting my dying uncle, Eric had been cultivating a relationship with this woman. I felt physically ill. There's more, Melanie added, her voice dropping lower. People are saying they got married last weekend. Some quick ceremony at the courthouse. Married. My husband had declared me dead and married another woman within days of my accident. The betrayal was so enormous, I couldn't process it. Sarah, who had been hovering nearby, stepped in when she saw my heart rate monitor spiking dangerously. I think that's enough for today, she said firmly, guiding Melanie toward the door. I'm so sorry, Morgan, Melanie called back. I should have told you sooner. After she left, Sarah sat with me, her presence steady as I tried to make sense of what I'd learned. You need legal help, she said finally. This isn't just betrayal, it's fraud. She was right. With her assistance, I called Benjamin Harrison the next morning. Morgan, I was beginning to worry, the attorney said. I've been trying to reach you about some concerning developments. Let me guess, I said bitterly. My husband has been asking about my inheritance. More than asking. He came to my office claiming to be your next of kin, saying you had passed away in an accident. He brought marriage certificates and what appeared to be death documents, though they didn't pass closer inspection. He's trying to steal my inheritance, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. It appears so. And he's not working alone. He brought a young woman with him who he introduced as your sister, claiming she should have partial inheritance rights. I don't have a sister, I said automatically, then froze. What was her name? Vanessa something. French surname. My mind raced. The familiar face. The resemblance people had noted between us. The timing of her appearance in Eric's life, just as Uncle James's health had begun to fail. Benjamin, I need you to do some digging into this woman's background, and I need you to come to the hospital tomorrow. I think my husband is planning something, and I need to be prepared. That night, I barely slept, my mind piecing together the fragments of this bizarre puzzle. How had Eric known about the inheritance before I told him? Why choose a woman who resembled me to play this con? And why did she look so familiar to me beyond just the physical resemblance? By morning, I had a sickening theory forming, one so twisted I could barely contemplate it. I asked Sarah to set up a small camera in my room, ostensibly for security. Then I sent a text to Eric's phone from Melanie's number, which she had let me borrow. I know about the inheritance. Morgan is awake and remembers everything. You need to fix this before she talks. The response came within minutes. We'll handle it today. Delete this message. They were coming, and I would finally get some answers. I spent the morning preparing myself, both mentally and physically, for the confrontation. Sarah helped me sit up properly in bed, adjusting my appearance so I looked slightly more vulnerable than I actually felt. Dr. Jessica coached me on maintaining emotional control. Remember, you hold the power here, she reminded me. No matter what he says or does, he cannot take that from you unless you allow it. Benjamin arrived at noon, briefcase in hand, and stationed himself in the chair by the window, where he wouldn't be immediately visible. The small camera Sarah had set up was discreetly recording, its tiny lens aimed at the foot of my bed. Are you certain you want to do this today? Benjamin asked, concerned. We could handle this through proper legal channels. I need to see his face, I replied. I need to understand why. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock at my door. My heart rate spiked, the monitor betraying my anxiety despite my composed exterior. Sarah squeezed my hand once before stepping back to stand near the bathroom door. Eric entered first, dressed in an expensive-looking blazer I'd never seen before. His hair was styled differently, and he wore a new watch that probably cost several thousand. The transformation from struggling artist to affluent sophisticate was jarring. His expression as he saw me was not surprise or relief, but annoyance, quickly masked by false concern. Morgan, he said, his voice theatrical. You're awake. We've been so worried. I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He glanced back toward the doorway, gesturing impatiently. A slender figure stepped into the room, remaining partially hidden behind him. I could only see a glimpse of dark hair and a designer dress. You remember Vanessa, of course, he said smoothly. Your cousin's daughter. I said nothing, watching as he moved further into the room, his confidence growing with each step. He'd always been an actor at heart, convincing in whatever role he chose to play. Today, he'd cast himself as the concerned husband. The doctors say your memory might be affected by the accident, he continued. So many things have happened while you've been unconscious. Like you telling everyone I was dead? I asked quietly. His step faltered momentarily before he recovered. A terrible misunderstanding. When they first brought you in, they thought you might not make it. I was devastated. Some people misinterpreted your grief? And the new apartment, the art gallery celebrations, the marriage license. His eyes narrowed, calculating. You've been listening to gossip, darling. Not good for your recovery. What matters now is getting you well and sorting out the financial aspects of your situation. He pulled some papers from his inner pocket. The doctors mentioned you might not be able to handle your affairs for some time. I've brought some simple forms authorizing me to manage things while you recover. I almost had to admire the performance. If I had been heavily medicated or confused, I might have believed his concerned act. But I could see the coldness behind his eyes, the impatience in the way he held out the papers. You mean the 11 million I inherited? I asked bluntly. His expression flickered, surprise quickly masked. You remember that? Yes, of course. Such a blessing, but also a responsibility. In your condition, the stress of managing such funds could impede your recovery. How thoughtful of you to worry about that. He smiled, mistaking my calm for compliance. I've always had your best interests at heart, Morgan. Is that why you blocked my social media accounts, changed our apartment locks, told my friends I was dead? Eric's facade began to crack. You're confused. The medication. Show her the video, Benjamin said suddenly, standing up from his chair. Eric spun around, genuinely startled. Who the hell are you? Benjamin Harrison, Mrs. Wallace's attorney, he replied calmly. And you must be the husband who has been attempting to defraud his injured wife. Benjamin set his tablet on the bed tray, playing security footage from his office, showing Eric and a young woman presenting falsified death certificates and claiming inheritance rights. That is enough. Eric snapped, moving to grab the tablet. Don't touch that, Sarah warned, stepping forward. Hospital security is right outside. The woman who had remained near the doorway finally moved forward, curiosity apparently overcoming caution. As she approached the bed, I got my first clear look at her face. The resemblance was even more striking up close. Same shaped eyes, similar nose. Even the way she carried herself reminded me of myself at a younger age. But there was something else. Something that triggered a deep, almost primal recognition. Vanessa stared at me, her expression shifting from nervous to confused to shocked, her face paling dramatically as our eyes locked. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice shaking. She is my mother. The room went completely silent. Eric lunged toward her, grabbing her arm. Shut up, he hissed. Stick to the plan. But Vanessa was transfixed, staring at me as if seeing a ghost. With trembling hands, she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photograph. I've been looking for you my entire life, she said, her voice breaking as she held out the photo for me to see. The image showed a teenage girl holding a newborn baby. Her face partly obscured, but unmistakably a younger version of myself. A photograph I hadn't seen in 17 years, one I thought had been destroyed long ago. As I stared at the evidence of my most carefully guarded secret, the room seemed to spin. The beeping of the heart monitor accelerated as pieces of a puzzle I never knew existed suddenly locked into place. My hands trembled as I took the photograph from Vanessa. The teenage girl in the image looked so young, so scared, her eyes red from crying as she held the tiny bundle for what she knew would be the first and last time. Where did you get this? I whispered. It was with me when I was adopted, Vanessa replied, her voice equally soft. The only link I had to my birth mother. I've carried it with me every day since I was old enough to understand what it meant. Eric made another attempt to intervene. This is ridiculous. She's clearly confused and trying to manipulate the situation. Be quiet, Eric, I said with a newfound authority that seemed to surprise everyone, including myself. For once in your life, just stop talking. I looked back at Vanessa, really studying her face. She had my mother's cheekbones in my eyes. How had I not seen it immediately? Perhaps because I had spent 17 years trying to forget, to push away the memory of the baby I had held only once. I was 18, I began, my voice steadying as I spoke. A senior in high school, with plans for college. My boyfriend at the time wanted nothing to do with the baby, and my parents were horrified by the scandal it would cause in our small town. Vanessa sat on the edge of my bed, transfixed. They sent me to stay with a distant aunt during the pregnancy. After you were born, they arranged a closed adoption. I was allowed to hold you once, and someone took this picture. I didn't know they had given you a copy. My adoptive parents told me it was the only thing that came with me, Vanessa explained. They were wonderful people who never hid the fact that I was adopted. When I turned 18, they supported my decision to search for my birth mother. How did you find Eric? Benjamin asked, his lawyer's mind still focused on unraveling the scheme. Vanessa looked uncomfortably at Eric, who stood rigid with anger by the window. I didn't find him. He found me, she admitted. About 3 months ago. He approached me at the gallery where I work. He said he knew who my birth mother was. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The memory box, I said, looking at Eric. You found it when we moved last year. Eric said nothing, but his expression confirmed my suspicion. I had kept a small wooden box with a few mementos from that period of my life. The hospital bracelet, a tiny hat, and a copy of that photograph. I thought I had hidden it well, but apparently not well enough. He told me you had been searching for me, too, Vanessa continued. That you were wealthy, but estranged from your family, and wanted to reconnect but were afraid of rejection. And when did marriage enter the picture? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Vanessa flushed with shame. It happened gradually. He was so attentive, so interested in helping me connect with you. When he proposed 2 weeks ago, saying it would make you happy to see me settled with someone you trusted, it seemed romantic. Then I had my accident, and suddenly I was more valuable dead than alive, I concluded. Eric finally broke his silence. You have no proof of anything. This is all circumstantial and emotional manipulation. Benjamin cleared his throat. Actually, we have quite a bit of evidence, including your attempts to access Morgan's accounts, falsified death certificates, and now this recorded confession. Not to mention bigamy, as you are still legally married to Morgan. What I don't understand, Sarah interjected, is why go through all this elaborate scheme? Why not just stay married to Morgan and enjoy the inheritance together? I looked at Eric, really looked at him, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Because he never loved me. I was convenient, a steady income, while he pursued his artistic dreams. But 11 million? That required a bigger plan. The will has a special provision, Benjamin explained. If Morgan had died without children, a significant portion would have gone to charity. But with a direct descendant, the entire inheritance would stay in the family. And as Vanessa's husband, Eric would have influence over those funds, I finished. Vanessa stood up, suddenly moving away from Eric. You used me. All those things you said about caring for me, about building a future together. Don't be naive, Eric snapped. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. You wanted to find your birth mother. I helped. The money was just a bonus. By declaring me dead and marrying my daughter? I asked incredulously. Half the inheritance would have gone to her anyway once the relationship was discovered, Eric argued, his true nature now fully exposed. I was just expediting the process, Benjamin pointed out. By committing fraud and potentially murder if Morgan had died from her injuries without regaining consciousness. Eric's face hardened. You can't prove that. We don't need to, I said quietly. You've done enough damage already. I turned to Vanessa, whose world had clearly been shattered. I'm so sorry you were dragged into this. She wiped tears from her eyes. All my life I imagined finding my birth mother. Never like this. Eric made a sudden move toward the door. This is absurd. I'm leaving. I wouldn't advise that, Benjamin said calmly. Hospital security is waiting outside, and I've already filed preliminary charges. Leaving now would only add fleeing to the list. As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared in the doorway. Eric looked wildly around the room, like a cornered animal searching for escape. Morgan, he tried one last time, his voice taking on the gentle tone I had once loved. We can work this out. Think about everything we've been through together. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, I replied. Officers, This is the man I mentioned. As they escorted Eric from the room, Vanessa and I were left in a strange, weighted silence. 17 years of separation hanging between us like an invisible wall. I never stopped thinking about you, I finally said. Not a single day. The days following Eric's arrest were a blur of legal meetings, police statements, and emotional conversations. Benjamin worked tirelessly to untangle the web of fraud Eric had created, discovering he'd attempted to access my bank accounts multiple times using forged documents. He was quite thorough, Benjamin explained. He had created a paper trail suggesting you had discussed the inheritance with him, even going so far as to forge emails. How much trouble is he in? I asked, not out of concern for Eric, but needing to understand the extent of his crimes. Fraud, forgery, attempted grand theft, bigamy, and potentially conspiracy charges. If we can prove he deliberately left you without medical assistance after the accident, he's looking at significant prison time. The betrayal still felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. 7 years of marriage, and I had never truly known the man I shared my bed with. What about the marriage to Vanessa? I asked. Already filing for annulment. Since your marriage to Eric was never legally dissolved, his marriage to Vanessa is invalid. Plus, the evidence of manipulation and fraudulent intent makes it a straightforward case. Vanessa had been visiting daily since the confrontation. Our initial meetings were awkward, filled with long silences and hesitant questions. How do you begin a relationship with the daughter you gave up 17 years ago, especially under such bizarre circumstances? Tell me about your parents, I asked during one of her visits. Your adoptive parents, I mean. Vanessa's face softened. They're wonderful. Dad is a high school science teacher. Mom works as a librarian. They always made sure I knew I was loved and wanted. I'm glad, I said sincerely. That was all I ever hoped for you. They want to meet you when you're ready, she added cautiously. They never spoke badly of you. They always told me you were very young and wanted me to have opportunities you couldn't provide. Tears filled my eyes. They sound like extraordinary people. Why did you never try to find me? She asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. I took a deep breath. Partly shame. Partly because I thought a clean break would be better for you. And partly because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would hate me for giving you up, that you would ask questions I didn't have good answers for, that seeing you happy with another family would break my heart all over again. Vanessa reached out tentatively and took my hand. I could never hate you. I have questions, yes, but I understand you were just a teenager faced with an impossible situation. Her forgiveness, so freely given, broke something open inside me. For the first time since the accident, I wept without restraint, releasing 17 years of guilt and regret. Sarah, who had been checking my vitals, quietly left the room to give us privacy. While my emotional wounds began the slow process of healing, my physical recovery continued as well. The surgeons had done excellent work on my leg, but the road to full mobility would be long. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, often leaving me exhausted and discouraged. You're making remarkable progress, Dr. Foster assured me. Many patients with your injuries would still be bedridden. I have good motivation, I replied, glancing at Vanessa, who had taken to attending my therapy sessions for moral support. Benjamin visited again with news about the inheritance. Given the circumstances, I believe we should discuss how you want to handle the estate, particularly in light of Vanessa's relationship to you. I had been thinking about this extensively. Uncle James left everything to me because he didn't know about Vanessa. Had he known he had a great niece, I believe he would have included her. So, you want to split the inheritance? Benjamin clarified. Yes, equally. Vanessa immediately protested. Morgan, no. That money is yours. I never came looking for you because of money. I know that, I assured her. But your family. My family. And I have 17 years of birthdays and Christmases to make up for. 2 weeks after Eric's arrest, I received a visit from Detective Laura Jennings, the officer handling the case. We found something concerning when executing the search warrant on your apartment, she explained, placing a sealed evidence bag on my bed tray. Inside was a small bottle of pills with a pharmacy label in my name, but for medication I had never been prescribed. These are powerful sedatives often used to treat severe insomnia, Detective Jennings explained. According to the prescription date, they were filled 3 days before your accident. I've never had trouble sleeping, I said, confused. I've never seen these before. We are investigating the possibility that your husband may have been medicating you without your knowledge. Several of your neighbors reported hearing arguments in the weeks before your accident, and one mentioned you seemed unusually tired and disoriented during your last conversation. The implication was clear and chilling. Had Eric been planning to get rid of me even before learning about the inheritance? Had the crash simply provided a convenient opportunity to accelerate his plans? We may never know the full extent of what he intended, Detective Jennings admitted. But rest assured, we are building the strongest case possible. As my discharge date approached, practical concerns surfaced. I couldn't return to the apartment I'd shared with Eric, both for legal and emotional reasons. Hotels weren't suitable. You could stay with me, Vanessa offered. My place is small, but it has an elevator and no stairs. I couldn't impose like that, I protested. It's not an imposition. I want to help, she insisted, then added with a small smile, besides, we have a lot of catching up to do. Sarah had another suggestion. What about your uncle's property? Benjamin mentioned it's sitting empty. The idea took root. The countryside estate where I had spent those few magical childhood days was now mine. It would need updating, but it offered a fresh start. It's over an hour from the city, Vanessa. That would be a long commute for you to the gallery. She looked down, fidgeting with her purse strap. Actually, I quit the gallery job last week. Too many memories of how Eric manipulated me there. What will you do now? She hesitated. I've been thinking about going back to school. I always wanted to study psychology, maybe focus on helping adoptees and birth parents navigate reunions. The serendipity of the moment wasn't lost on me. The estate has plenty of room. You could stay there while you figure things out. If you want to, of course. The look of hope on her face was answer enough. Somehow, from the wreckage of betrayal and pain, a new kind of family was emerging, one built on truth and choice, rather than deception. 6 weeks after the crash that changed everything, I was finally discharged from the hospital, leaving the place that had been my home during. This transformation felt strangely emotional. I hugged Sarah tightly, promising to keep in touch. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, she told me. Remember that on the hard days. The drive to Uncle James's estate, now my estate, was quiet. Vanessa concentrated on navigating the winding country roads while I watched the city give way to rolling hills and open fields. A light snow had fallen the night before, dusting the landscape in pristine white that seemed fitting for our fresh start. The house itself was grander than I remembered, a sprawling Victorian with a wraparound porch. Benjamin had arranged modifications, ramps, a temporary bedroom on the first floor, grab bars. What do you think? I asked Vanessa as we pulled into the circular driveway. It's beautiful, she replied, her eyes wide. Like something from a storybook. Those first few weeks of cohabitation were an adjustment. We were mother and daughter biologically, but strangers in nearly every other way. We circled each other cautiously, learning habits and preferences, finding our rhythm. I discovered Vanessa was a morning person who sang in the shower. She learned I couldn't function without coffee and preferred silence until my second cup. Small revelations that gradually built a bridge between us. My physical recovery continued with home visits from a physical therapist. The pain was constant but evolving, sharp stabs giving way to dull aches as my body slowly healed. I graduated from a wheelchair to a walker, then to crutches, each transition a small victory celebrated with cupcakes Vanessa would bring home. The emotional healing was more complicated. Dr. Jessica continued our therapy sessions via video calls, helping me process not only Eric's betrayal, but also the sudden reappearance of the daughter I had given up. Relationships built under extreme circumstances can be intense, but fragile, she cautioned. Give yourself and Vanessa time to develop a sustainable connection. Taking her advice, we began establishing rituals, Sunday movie nights, Thursday cooking experiments, daily walks around the property as my mobility improved. We talked about everything and nothing, filling in the 17-year gap. One evening, about 3 months after moving to the estate, Vanessa hesitantly brought up a subject we had both been avoiding. "I'd like you to meet my parents," she said. "My adoptive parents, I mean." My stomach tightened with anxiety. "Do they hate me?" "No," she said firmly. "They've always spoken of you with respect. They understood you were in an impossible situation." The meeting was arranged for the following weekend. I spent days worrying about what to wear, what to say, how to thank them for raising the daughter I couldn't keep. When the day arrived, I was a bundle of nerves, pacing the front hall with my cane. Mark and Diana Lauren turned out to be exactly as Vanessa had described, kind, unpretentious people who greeted me with warmth rather than judgment. "We have always considered ourselves the custodians of Vanessa until you could be part of her life again," Diana told me over tea. "We are so grateful that day has come, even under these difficult circumstances." Their generosity of spirit humbled me. Instead of seeing me as a threat, they welcomed me as an addition to their family. By the end of their visit, we had made plans for holidays and future gatherings, expanding our unconventional family even further. The legal proceedings against Eric continued in the background. I attended court hearings when required, facing him across the courtroom with a strength I didn't know I possessed. He had lost the charismatic charm that once defined him, appearing sullen and diminished in his orange jumpsuit. When he was finally sentenced to 8 years for fraud and related charges, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet relief that this chapter was truly closing. "Do you still love him?" Vanessa asked me once after a particularly difficult hearing. "No," I answered truthfully. "I mourn the person I thought he was, but that person never existed. He was a character Eric created, like one of his paintings." "Because you thought love meant supporting someone else's dreams at the expense of your own," Vanessa observed. Her insight struck me deeply. "When did you get so wise?" I asked. "I had good parents," she said simply. "All 3 of them." As my physical recovery plateaued, I began considering my own future. The advertising career I had pursued mainly to support Eric no longer appealed. With financial security, I had the freedom to reinvent myself. I started writing, initially just as therapy, but eventually with more serious intent. My story, fictionalized but emotionally true, began to take shape as a novel. The process was cathartic, transforming pain into purpose. 1 year to the day after the accident, we held a small gathering at the estate. Sarah came, along with Benjamin, Detective Jennings, Dr. Jessica, Melanie, and Vanessa's adoptive parents. People who had supported us through the darkest times, now sharing in the light. As I looked around at these faces, at the unlikely family we had created from the wreckage of betrayal, I was struck by the strange alchemy of life, its ability to transmute lead into gold if given enough time and pressure. "I want to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass, "to unexpected journeys and the people who help us navigate them." Later, as Vanessa and I sat alone on the porch steps after everyone had gone, she asked the question that had been on both our minds. "Do you ever regret it?" Not the adoption, but everything that happened after the accident, discovering Eric's betrayal, all the pain. I considered carefully before answering. Regret implies I would choose a different path if given the chance, and I wouldn't. Not if it meant not finding you again. Money can reveal people's true characters, stripping away pretense and exposing what lies beneath. Eric's betrayal taught me that painful lesson. But it also brought me back to my daughter, giving me a second chance at a relationship I thought was lost forever. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives create openings for the best to enter. The crash that broke my body led to healing my heart. The husband who betrayed me inadvertently reunited me with the daughter I had grieved for 17 years. The inheritance that made me a target also gave me the freedom to rebuild my life on my terms. As the stars appeared above us, I realized that true wealth had nothing to do with the millions in my bank account, and everything to do with the authentic connections I had formed in the aftermath of disaster. I had lost a husband, but gained a daughter, lost illusions, but gained clarity, lost my old life, but gained one infinitely more real and satisfying. "What are you thinking about?" Vanessa asked, noticing my silence. "That sometimes you have to survive a crash to find your way home." Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and unexpected second chances. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that even our darkest moments can lead to dawn. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most vulnerable moments.